I was your guest at Bastille Day, and it was one of the greatest parades I've ever seen. Because of what I witnessed, we may do something like that on July 4th in Washington, down Pennsylvania. I don't know. We're going to have to try and top it.
They laughed. It sounded so far-fetched. People in the room laughed when he said it. But here we are, 5 months later, talking about President Trump's desire for an official military parade. The White House is insisting it's all still in the early preliminary stages. But if this does happen, here's the club the United States would join. North Korea, China, and Russia regularly hold these types of marches. According to the Washington Post, quote, Trump has long mused publicly and privately about wanting such a parade. But a January 18th meeting between Trump and top generals in the Pentagon's tank, a room reserved for top secret discussions, marked a tipping point, according to two officials briefed on the planning. Joining us at the table is Medal of Honor recipient and MSNBC military analyst, retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. Alicia is back with us. Go.
I don't want to be hyped.
No, listen, okay, so here's what I want to say. So I think that it's dangerous for people to be derisive of the idea of honoring the military. But I want to know from you if being asked to march in a military parade is how the military would like to be honored.
No, of course not. I mean, it's labor intensive, it's personnel intensive, it's capital intensive. Troops hate doing it. In order to do a good parade, you have to practice it for months in advance, and you have to do it over and over and over again. They hate it. If you really want to honor veterans, like the president says, the best way to do that would be for civilians to parade, and then the veterans would stand on the sidewalks eating popcorn and drinking beer. But being in a parade stinks. It's an awful, not to say nothing of the fact that it's an awful waste of time and of money. We're short of people. General Mattis was on the Hill, what, yesterday, day before yesterday, talking about how there are about 19,000 soldiers and airmen he'd like to get in the ranks, but he can't because of the budget consideration. And now we're going to spend money on this. And you've got an Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps over-deployed, under-trained in many respects. No, we're going to spend our time training. It's got to be doing something other than marching, because at the end of that, and I've done plenty of marches, I can tell you, at the end of this, the only thing you can do really well is march. And that doesn't do you very well in this environment.
What I was struck by in the Washington Post report was that, you know, George W. Bush used to go to the tank to watch operations. Some of the most serious conversations were lives are at stake, or special operation. I mean, the idea that he used a briefing in the tank to ask for a parade, what do you think Secretary Mattis thought at that moment?
Well, he may have had when he left the room, may have had exactly the same response that Tillerson did at one point when he was commenting on the intellectual acuity of the president some time ago.
What was that?
Not repeatable on family television. So,
Tillerson called him a moron.
So
you think that the Secretary of Defense thinks is a moronic
I mean, don't forget, Mattis is a Marine. I mean, he's done plenty of marches and probably has sworn that he'll never do them again if he doesn't have to. And don't forget, he's running a large scale. He's trying to defend the country with 320 million people with lots of threats against it. Doing it with scarce resources and scarce time and scarce money and scarce troops. Got people downrange 15 times in a row and so on. And the next thing we're going to do is going to march. He probably not scratching his head, but is very, very disappointed.
Charlie, I want to read you something that my old colleague, General Michael Hayden, tweeted. Parades. I used to watch them in Bulgaria. This is... maybe I want to give the president the benefit of the doubt that his desire was to honor the troops, but it's hard to do that when you watch that tape of him with Macron, where he clearly seems to be motivated by wanting to have a bigger and better parade than Macron did.
Oh, Nicolle, this is the Trumpiest thing ever when you think about it. You know, I mean, he wants to show people that he's got a bigger missile than anybody else. You know, he's got a bigger button than anyone else. I just hope that he gets a uniform for it. But look, I think Aaron Blake from the Washington Post was absolutely right when he said this is also kind of the ultimate Trump troll, because you know that what's going to happen is that you know, he wants this parade. It's going to be about the military, right? And when Democrats and critics and people in the media, you know, mock it or criticize it, he will wrap himself in the flag and support for the troops and say, well, you know, again, you people don't support the troops. You don't support the military. It really is kind of, when you think about it, I mean, it is about as, you know, as Trumpian as you could possibly get. And it is going to be the ultimate troll. And I just don't think he's going to find a way to not go through with this. From his point of view, appealing to his base, you know, I'm the biggest, baddest guy around. It's kind of the perfect messaging if you're Donald Trump and you are marketing to your base.
Alicia, I keep sort of falling in love with the potential of the guardrail. You know, the idea that a Secretary Mattis will say to his face instead of back in his office that this is a moronic idea. The idea that Secretary Tillerson will say to his face what New York Times, what NBC News reported and Rex Tillerson never denied. I keep on fantasizing that, you know, like a Michael J. Fox character will walk into the American president and say, "You work for me, Mr. President. I'm a voter." The fantasy's dead. There's no one around this president that does anything other than, as Charlie just said, get him a bigger button, get him a bigger bomb, get him a bigger, you know, Twitter feed. They are all lackeys and stooges to a president with, even in this instance, again, I want to believe that maybe he wanted to do something nice, but it's really hard to do so when you see all the one-upsmanship that he does publicly.
You definitely have your next edition of 18 Acres just written out, apparently, in your own mind. But no, you're absolutely right. There's no one who's telling him no. There's no one who's saying we could actually do things for our veterans, like deal with the suicide epidemic that we have going on, deal with
TBI
care, deal with housing. I mean, there are so many substantive issues that this could be redirected to, but this is exactly where Trump wants us to exist. We're talking about symbolism. We've just spent 5 minutes talking about it instead of talking about Russia sanctions, instead of talking about the budget deal, and that is where he's comfortable. So it's hard not to also watch this and feel like we haven't all just fallen directly into his trap, because now we're having the conversation that he wants to have.
So give us some advice, because you're all right, and Charlie's right. This is going to be turned into, we're going to become his foil. How do we amplify voices like yours and sort of underscore what Alicia just said? If you really want to honor veterans, shorten the waiting list at the VA hospitals.
Do anything other than this.
Well, what should we do? What's the case against the parade?
If you're real, well, the case against the parade is that it's capital intensive, personnel intensive, and time intensive, and we don't have the capability of actually doing that and defending the republic at the same time. The people who are closest to him, who have his ear, who are military people, we're talking about Kelly.
Why didn't he stop it?
McMaster. Well, I mean, that's a fair and not a rhetorical question. Those are I mean, that's what I was getting to. Those are the people who have to sidle up to him and say, we're not doing it. We can't do it. We're not doing it.
But how did he even get, I mean, they were, I would imagine, in the car with him on the way to the Pentagon. Why didn't they tell him, hey, you're not going to bring up your crazy parade idea, are you, sir?
Well, don't forget that there's an argument that says that the president only says the last thing he was told. And if you weren't the last guy to say, don't say that, and the guy after you said, do say that, he's going to say it. I know, seriously, the adults really have to get control of the playroom.
All right, you still have faith that there are some. All right, we've got some late breaking news. We have to sneak in one more break, but we're going to bring it to you. It's about Russia, and it's now.